think Yumna will come in at 8:30 after her meeting though.
Okay.
Anyway, Anil, I think we can start now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good evening to our fellow poets and writers of Writers Table, Literary Mantram, and to members of Art Mantram, the parent group, and to members of Poetry at Home, and to Dr. Sulochana Nalapat, who will be reading this evening. A warm welcome to you. Today's theme is imagery in creative writing, largely to do with poetry, but with a few excerpts from prose as well. So without much ado, I'll just take you through imagery in creative writing so that we as writers and poets, whether of prose or of poetry, can enhance our writing and take it to the next level through imagery. So I'm going to speak now about imagery in creative writing. In fact, this is actually a continuation of what Mr. K. Jayakumar had said at the last meeting. So sensory imagery is a literary device writers employ to engage a reader's mind on multiple levels. At our last meeting, as Mr. K. Jayakumar had pointed out, imagery is a landscape of the mind. A particular image or a line resonates or stays with the reader long after the idea or concept has gone. Ideas and concepts evaporate, he had pointed out, and it is the image which continues to haunt the reader's imagination. A poem at birth is basically a fleeting emotion or a feeling in the poet's mind, which the poet or the writer expresses. And it can be largely personal. For it to go to the next level, we have to employ many devices in order to engage the reader. In a nutshell, there are 6 different types. There are actually 5 different types of sensory imagery related to the senses. Visual imagery is when you can visualize the colors, shapes, forms, and aesthetics of something that is described. Example of visual imagery, I quote from Matsuo Basho, translated by Jane Reichold. A field of cotton as if the moon had flowered. I think it's such a beautiful image. So visual imagery is description that stimulates the eyes, especially the mind's eye. Then we also take another example from Louise Gluck's poem, October. Daybreak, the low hills shine, ochre and fire, even the fields shine. I know what I see. Sun that could be the August sun, returning everything that was taken away. In poetry, the imagery tends to be more economic than in prose. Now, the second imagery is auditory. It stimulates the ears. When you can hear the sounds of nature, marching, machinery, or someone's voice, it's because of the description employed in the author's auditory imagery. Example, Few believe we are in the middle of the end because ruin can happen as slowly as plaque, blocking arteries, and only later feels as true as your hand resting on my hip. Both of us, quiet as roses, waiting for the bees to arrive. Quiet as roses, waiting for the bees to arrive. I think a really beautiful piece of imagery. A quote is from Julie Danho, excerpt from I Want to Eat Bugs with You Underground, from the Bennington Review. Tactile imagery is description that stimulates your sense of touch. Sensations like itching, stickiness, and the warmth of sunlight all count as tactile imagery, which appeals to the way your skin might feel in that moment. Tactile experiences only refer to external sensations, primarily on the skin. When a writer describes internal sensations, they are using organic imagery, which we'll give a few brief examples of later. Tactile imagery, referring to touch. And now, how shall I describe it? Now all was still, still as when some pain ceases. A peculiarly perceptible prickling stillness, as if a wound were healing. Excerpt from Rainer Maria Rilke from Journal of My Other Self. Now, the fourth type of imagery is olfactory imagery, which stimulates the nose. By describing the peculiarities of a scent, its richness, pungence, weight, distinctness, or physical effect, the author transports the reader through the use of olfactory imagery. A fun fact is that the olfactory bulb is situated just in front of the hippocampus, which processes memory. As a result, smells often stimulate stronger memories than the other senses. So you can use olfactory imagery to arouse both smell and memory. An example of olfactory imagery. The flower shop was here, and it was my father's domain. But it was also marvelously other. This place, heavy with the drowsy scent of velvet-petaled roses and Provençal freesias in the middle of winter, the damp earth spring fragrance of just watered azaleas and cyclamen, all mixed up with the headachy smell of bitter chocolate. So many images to stimulate the olfactory, the sense of smell. Patricia Hampel, excerpt from The Florist's Daughter. Then we have gustatory imagery, which is imagery that stimulates the tongue. Gustatory imagery is the rarest of the 5 types of imagery. It can throw the reader into different cultures, cuisines, and histories. One of the best examples of gustatory imagery is from This Is Just to Say by William Carlos Williams. I have eaten the plums that were in the icebox and which you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me, they were delicious, so sweet, and so cold. Writers have 2 other types of imagery at their disposal, kinesthetic imagery and organic imagery. Kinesthetic refers to descriptions of motions. The sensations one feels when on the move, like running against the wind or swimming through brisk waters. I think Mayura has used it in one of her poems. The whale and the I think the whale and the krill will swim side by side. I take an excerpt from Britt Bennett, excerpt from The Mothers. It was strange learning the contours of another's loneliness. You could never know it all at once. Like stepping inside a dark cave, you felt along the walls, bumping into jagged edges. And for the prose writers in our group, from Charles Dickens, A Tale of Two Cities. This is kinesthetic imagery. At last, swooping at a street corner by a fountain, one of its wheels came to a sickening little jolt, and there was a loud city from a number of voices, and the horses reared and plunged. And the last is organic imagery, which refers to descriptions of internal sensation. When the writer uses concrete description to show an internal landscape of feelings, pain, emotions, and desires. Organic imagery can be physical, like stomach pain or a headache, but it can also be emotional. The feeling of your heart dropping into your gut, or the burn of jealousy in your temples. Example, Robert Frost, excerpt from Birches. So was I once myself, a swinger of birches, and so I dream of going back to be. It's when I'm weary of considerations and life is too much like a pathless wood. So if we focus on the different types of imagery that we are using, we can perhaps actually become better writers. And another device, literary device that we can employ is synesthesia. Synesthesia involves experiencing one sensory stimulus through the prism of a different stimulus. So we can blend two different sensation, phrases like a loud dress or a chilly gaze, blend our sensory modalities. Examples of synesthesia in literature, famous examples, John Keats, Ode to a Nightingale. Tasting of Flora and the Country Green. And in Oscar Wilde, in Salome, thy voice was a censer that scattered strange perfumes. And when I looked on thee, I heard a strange music. So with this, now, since I have introduced imagery and how we can actually use it to stretch ourselves, to do mental gymnastics, blending different sense forms, to challenge our reader, I think that would help us as an exercise. And winding up the two exercises in imagery that I've done, one is voice in poetry, and this one is imagery in poetry to enhance our writing. We write our poems as feelings, but how to transmute it and take it and transform it through imagery to a higher level. So now over to, for this evening, I have Dr. Sulochana Nalapat has very kindly consented to be our guest speaker, and she will be reading a poem, Houses, in English, and in Malayalam the title is different, by Nalapat Balamani Amma. Srimati Balamani Amma is one of the renowned poets from Kerala. She had no formal education and was self-taught. She was guided by her uncle, Narayana Menon, a visionary poet, philosopher. Balamani Amma received many awards, including the Saraswati Samman one of the most prestigious literary awards in the country, and she received the Padma Bhushan. A visionary poet in some of her epic poems like Vishwamitra, Valmiki, Parshurama, she has reinterpreted our mythological giants in a very contemporary and humane manner. Her daughter, Dr. Sulochana Nalapat, worked on various James Finlay estates as a medical officer. She worked extensively in the comprehensive labor welfare scheme of Upasi. She retired as manager of the Community Development and Social Welfare Department of Tata Tea. Dr. Sulochana Nalapat has authored 12 books, 2 of which are in English, The Story of Munar and the monograph of Srimati Balamani Amma. Over to you, Dr. Sulochana Nalapat. We are so honored to have you read Srimati Balamani Amma's poem to us this evening. But before that, Dr. Sulochana Nalapat, Anil Kumar Parath will just give a background of the poem for our non-Malayalam participants, non-Malayali participants, sorry. Over to you, Anil Kumar Parath.
Thank you, Purabi. See, this poem by Nalapat Balamaniamma is titled Veedugal in Malayalam, and it's very nice poem, full of imagery and very beautifully written. 1939 to 1945, to give a backdrop about the poem, was a bloody period any which way in India. You know, the Second World War was raging, and the country was being chopped up into India and Pakistan with a carving knife. The reigning color was red on the earth and the sky. In Calcutta, Bengal was one of the 2 states that was cleaved, and the waters in the rivers ran red. It is believed that the human soul journeys through very many lifetimes in order to attain perfection and purity. In this poem, Veedugal, the houses are symbolically the bodies that the souls have to enter. It begins with a striking imagery of dead souls watching from over the great city. They were young souls ruthlessly cast out from the steamroller of their lives. Hovering in the skies, they yearn for a body, a home to enter and complete their sojourn on earth. Veedugal is a fantastic poem by any standards, and it's an honor to hear it from Dr. Sulochana Nalapat today. Over to you, madam.
Thank you. Lovely to be with you all. Purabi's daughter's Bihu dance I saw, and the other showed me. Anyway, that is an aside. Actually, we grew up in Calcutta. My father, mother were in Calcutta, and we have seen terrible, terrible things at that time. Through all senses and very deep in the heart. But there is one symbol, the most fascinating one, imagery in that poem is the Gnostic symbol of Egypt or Mesopotamia, wherever it is. It is of Ouroboros. You all would have heard about Ouroboros. It signifies eternity. Serpent is swallowing its own tail. So it means it is, it signifies eternal cycle of destruction and recreation which is going on. This is what we believe. And this serpent, Balamniamma sees, and the hood of this serpent, she sees the most precious stones, very bright, precious stone, and that is supposed to be the culture of the different lands. It could be American Indians, it could be African, wherever it is. And each culture is, there is no hierarchy there. The different cultures, each one is as precious as the other. Nothing is, there is no hierarchy, nothing is above us. And that point, I think we have to catch in my Amma's poem. That's very important. So I'll read the poem in Malayalam. Amma writes in, she has done some translations in English also of some of her poems. Veedugal it is called. It is written in 1946. I am 40 born. So I was right there when all these things were happening in Calcutta as a child. We were 4 children and I'm the youngest. ആജിബോവിൽ നിന്നെത്തി ആത്മഗേഹങ്ങൾ കകത്താശു കാൽവെക്കെ തെല്ലൊന്നമ്പരക്കുന്നു ഞങ്ങൾ. എങ്ങനെ ഉലകാകെ ഗ്രഹിക്കാൻ വളർന്നോരു ഞങ്ങളെ ഒതുക്കുമീ കൊച്ചു വീടുകളാവോ. ഞങ്ങൾക്കു പിന്നിൽ പ്രൗഢം നിവർന്നു കിടക്കുന്നുണ്ടങ്ങ് ദാരുണ യന്ത്ര നിർഘോഷ പ്രകമ്പിതം. വ്യോമസാഗര ഗ്രാമ നഗരാചലാകീർണം വീണതാം യുഗമുന്നിൻ ജീർണ സംസ്കാരത്തിന്റെ കൂണുകൾ പടകുടീരങ്ങളാൽ സമാക്രാന്തം. മരണം പൊഴിക്കുന്ന തീപ്പൊരിച്ചിരിയാൽ വിസ്ഫുരിതം രണരംഗം വിസ്തൃതം വിശ്വവ്യാപ്തം. അവിടെ പതിച്ചെട്ടുകാലിമുട്ടകൾ പോലെ അനുഭൂതികൾ തിങ്ങിപ്പിളർന്നു നിമിഷങ്ങൾ. ജീവിതം കൊടുങ്കാറ്റിൽ പതറി പാളിക്കത്തി കേവലം മങ്ങി പൊരിപ്രായമായി അപ്പോഴപ്പോൾ. വേനലിൽ വെളിച്ചത്തിൽ മന്ദസത്വരായി സുത്തി ലീനരായി ചുങ്ങിച്ചൂളി കിടന്ന തവളകൾ ആദിമവികാരങ്ങൾ. വേനലിൽ വെളിച്ചത്തിൽ മന്ദസത്വരായി സുഷുപ്തിയിൽ ലീനരായി ചുങ്ങിച്ചുളുങ്ങി കിടന്ന തവളകൾ. These are frogs, no, they are hibernating. വേനലിൽ വെളിച്ചത്തിൽ മന്ദസത്വരായി സുത്തിലീനരായി ചുങ്ങിച്ചുളി കിടന്ന തവളകൾ ആദിമവികാരങ്ങൾ. Those are the primal instincts. കാലവർഷത്തിൽ പോലെ when the rain comes, ആസുരാഹ്ലാദാരവം മുഴക്കി വീണ്ടും വീണ്ടും. അറിഞ്ഞാർ അവർ അങ്ങ് കാലത്തിൻ മഹത്വത്തെ, അറിഞ്ഞാർ അവരങ്ങ് കാലത്തിൻ മഹത്വത്തെ, അറിഞ്ഞാർ വ്യക്തിത്വത്തിൻ നിസ്സാരഭാവത്തെയും. അറിഞ്ഞാർ നരവംശ സംസ്കാരം ഏതും മൂർധാവണി രത്നം താൻ ഏതിന് അപ്പാമ്പിൻ പ്രഭാവത്തെ. We are coming to the serpent once again. അറിഞ്ഞാർ നരവംശ സംസ്കാരം ഏതും മൂർധാവണി രത്നം താൻ ഏതിന് അപ്പാമ്പിൻ പ്രഭാവത്തെ. എങ്കിലും ആമന്ത്രിച്ചു ഞങ്ങളോടാരോ, somebody whispered to us, രണപങ്കിലാത്മാവാത്ത പാരുണ്ടാക്കാൻ പോരും മർത്യൻ. My mother always ends a poem on a positive note. She doesn't weep over a lot of things. ഉന്നിത്ര പ്രേമാഖ്യാന ഗർഭമം മൗനത്തോട്, in silence, ഇന്നിതാ മുന്നിൽ അണിനിരക്കുന്നു ഭവനങ്ങൾ. മധുരസ്മരണകൾ സൗരഭം വീശി തിങ്ങും മമതാമഹേഷിതൻ കുറിക്കൂട്ടളുക്കുകൾ. ചൊരി നീർക്കണങ്ങളാൽ ഒരു കൈമണ്ണാൽ ഭാവി പുരുഷാന്തരത്തെ പുലർത്തും പൂച്ചട്ടികൾ. That's it.
This is so beautiful. Very, very nice. It sounds so nice.
Yes, it has such a, read in
Lovely
Malayalam,
rhythm.
and Malayalam is supposed to be one of the sweetest languages. Now, over to Anuradha Nalapat, daughter of Dr. Sulochana Nalapat, who will read the translated version in English for us. Over to you, Anuradha.
Thank you, Purabi. So this is an attempt at the translation of this amazing poem. It's not too good, but then we will have to settle for this There are a lot of words which I was not able to translate it in the right way, but anyway, this is what it is. Just before stepping into the body, the soul's container, for a moment we stood perplexed. We who have grown to embrace vast skies, how do we now shrink into our houses below? Behind us spreads proudly the city, now shattered, horrified. Its skies, the earth, its rivers and hills pitiably tremble amidst the barrage of war machines. Mushrooms sprout from a decayed culture of a fallen era, littering battlefields. A war zone explodes with a crackling laughter that death showers, vast, worldwide. Moments brimming, jostling with yearning, burst forth like spider eggs. Life shudders in this typhoon, blazes forth, then subsides, flickers now and then. In summer, in light, primal instincts wrinkled, curled up in fetal slumber, awaken like toads in rainy season, hollering, rejoicing in Asuric celebration. They understood the greatness of time. They understood trivialities of identities born. They glimpsed the inimitable serpent, adorning every civilization, a jewel on its hood. And yet someone whispers in our ears of man's capability of creating an earth unsoiled by war. Coiled in silence, wombs of love awaken. Coiled in silence, wombs of love awaken. Houses in array beckon, await your arrival. With kumkum sandal kits of the goddess of love, these houses await, releasing their fragrance. A few teardrops and a handful of earth. A few teardrops and a handful of earth, and these flower pots shall nurture a future generation.
Thank you, Anuradha. Yeah, sorry, please.
Yeah, towards the end, you saw the imagery of the snake, which holds all civilizations equally. She does not say that this is bad and that is good. All of them are jewels on its head. That is what she says. And Amma had mentioned about the Ouroboros and the light and the dark and how it keeps swallowing its own tail. Eternally, this keeps happening. So that is it.
It's a lovely translation to English. I was really holding my breath because after hearing such a beautiful poem in Malayalam, I was wondering whether any justice could be given when we translate it. But you've done a very, very good job. The magic of the combination of the Malayalam word is unfortunately, can only be enjoyed by those of us who know Malayalam. Because that magic can never be captured in any translation.
Yes.
But the gist of the poem has been beautifully translated.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Shaji, you are very fortunate to understand, the language. We could only understand the rhythm and, of course, the images The image of the serpent is very powerful. Coiled in silence, wounds of love awaken. Sanjula, I think you want to say something. Over to you.
I just want to say that it's been a pleasure to see 3 generations of beautiful poetic talent in front of us. It was so nice that one poem, and then of course, the daughter read it so beautifully in Malayalam, and then her daughter Anuradha read it in English. I think this was really wonderful. Excellent idea to do it like this. Loved it. Loved every moment of this poetry.
Now, because of the constraints of time, I'm sorry I cannot. Others, please put your comments on the chat box. Thank you so much, Dr. Sulochana Nalapat. We are just so honored to have you on this platform. And Anuradha, you rendered it so beautifully and gently, the English translation, and spoken of, during the time described was so chaotic. Just after the Second World War, India was still, struggling for its independence. So many things happening, so much of violence, bloodshed, and a new identity to be forged for India. Now over to our guest poet for the evening, another guest poet who we invited, Mayura Tiwari. Mayura Tiwari is an accomplished poet in her own right, with publications to her credit. And she is a teacher at Pathway School, but she will introduce herself and talk about the process of imagery in her poems and read her poems. Over to you, Mayura.
Thank you so much, Purvi.
Yeah, others, please mute yourselves while while the poet is reading. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Purvi, for this opportunity to read my poems at such an august gathering. The poem that was read before was so beautiful. I don't know whether I can do justice to the standard here, but I will try my best. A little bit about myself. I mean, since I grew up in Darjeeling, in the tea gardens, I think nature has played a very, very important role in my life. And even when I was at school, boarding school, I was fortunate to have my evening study desk quite often near the window. And I spent the first half an hour always watching the sun set over the mountains. And I think, in every aspect, I have been with nature. And nature has helped me understand life. Nature has helped me resolve conflicts. And hats off to nature. I kind of worship nature. And I think that's why imagery forms, it naturally comes into my poems. Sometimes I have tried to use certain techniques, but usually it just flows. And the process of my writing poetry is that it starts with a word somewhere, or it starts with an image somewhere, and then it plays around in my mind. And then when it comes out whole. And most times I do not, edit more than just a few words here and there. I play by sound. And if it sounds right, it's fine. Otherwise, then I change it. And especially that sound comes in when I'm playing with syllables, whether something which is of one syllable should come first, or whether it should be a 2-syllable or 3-syllable. So I play by sound a lot, and that's the process that I follow. So I'll just start with the poem that Purvi asked me that I must read. And this is in response to Pablo Neruda's Keeping Quiet, which is such a beautiful poem. All his poems are beautiful, but this one particularly is very close to my heart because it so beautifully describes nature. And this is a poem that I wrote in response to Keeping Quiet. In response to Pablo Neruda's Keeping Quiet, 2 moments of peace. I must also say that for this particular poem, since I was talking about 2 minutes, I tried to keep everything very succinct so that I could pack in a lot in those 2 minutes of quiet that we were given. 2 moments of peace, no predator, no prey. The whole wide world for frolic and play. The whale and the krill will swim side by side, the deer with the tiger, no need to hide. The trawlers idle, the engine killed, 2 moments of calm with aggression stilled. Here I have played deliberately with the words killed and stilled, because in a sense, both of them are still. But one is where, the stillness is for a little while and it's deliberate. For 2 whole moments, the world is ours, out in the open, each one of us. 2 moments of peace, no predator, no prey. The whole wild world for frolic and play. The second poem that I've chosen is a longish one, and it's different. It's on Auschwitz. And this is something that I wrote when I was perchance reading about the Holocaust. And I imagined myself being there. And so it's a persona that I've adopted of a Jew. So here there is very strong kinesthetic imagery. There's a lot of organic imagery. And, it's almost that the cries are coming out. Auschwitz. The queues are long. I cannot see, but my leaden weight tells me we are being led to Auschwitz. Could you tell by the way we laughed that the children of Moses were Jews? You can tell by the way we walk that we are Jews. The man I dreamed with, leading our oldest joy, his every step so grand, his every breath so brave, for one 5 summers old. Can you tell by the way he smiles that my 5-year-old is a Jew? Can you tell by the way he pines that his father is a Jew? And me in another queue, clutching at my breast, our babe, wailing as I crush her in the anguish that my eyes can no longer hold. Can you tell by the way she wails that my baby is a Jew? Can you tell by the way she loves that her mother is a Jew? My little boy yonder, buttoning with pride and frozen hands, knee-length trousers on freezing thighs, a wan smile as he meets my eyes. Is the winter long, or the summer but a dream? Can you tell by his boyish pride that my firstborn is a Jew? Can you tell by the way the sun shines that it's shining on a Jew? I reach out my fingers, but there's none to hold. Just frozen icicles, bitterly cold. My eyes are streaming, but there's none to brush the frozen sorrow of my hopes. Can you tell by the way they freeze that these tears are Jews? You can tell by the way we long for freedom that So you will tell by the way we fall that we are Jews? No.
I'm sorry, can somebody who's disturbing the reading?
Yeah.
Mayura, can you just go back a few lines?
Yeah,
continue?
I will. Can you tell by the way they freeze that these tears are Jews? You can tell by the way we long for freedom that we are Jews. So you will tell by the way we fall that we are Jews. No. You look at my yellow star and say, yes, she was a Jew. The next poem that I'm going to read is Through the Eyes of a River. This is when I was visiting Prague, and I thought it would be very nice to understand what a river feels about a city. And I spent a lot of time just walking by the river, and the river there or river in other places, and I was tempted to write from the point of view of the river. So this one has a lot of kinesthetic imagery also. through the eyes of a river, Vltava on Prague. Giddy with the passions of youth swirling in my veins, I had been rushing forth, riding on the madness of spring. There's a lot of sibilance in this poem, and I used that. I think it just came out because I found the river was powerful and yet very, very soft. And I think that's probably why, because this is again one of the poems that just came out, and I wanted to play along with imagery. I think this whole thing of enjambment, where the river is just flowing and the wind comes down and flows across, and there's nothing to stop it unless it comes, across. So I played with enjambment, and I think the sibilance has come because I wanted to, or I felt the softness of the river. Giddy with the passions of youth swirling in my veins, I've been rushing forth, riding on the madness of spring until I saw her and gasped. Then sighing softly and slowly, I swung around the sands and swantered through the city of Prague, inhaling the fragrance of the lindens that lined the streets. I felt the centuries stare down at me, now Gothic, now Baroque, now Art Nouveau. I heard the whispers of lovers and the sighs of the old, the giggles and gossips, the sermons and scolds as the wind blew over the castle walls and slid down the slope, then skimmed over me up into the Jewish quarter, which for centuries, I'm told, was a ghetto, where now, among the synagogues, old and new, still stands the synagogue Hitler said must stay to house the mementos of an extinct race. And when the bells tolled in the eventide, I heard scurrying footsteps and swishing gowns make their way to the opera house, and through the door left ajar, Mozart and Smetana and Dvorak and Strauss broke through the silence of the gathering night. I saw the spires and the steeples rise above the cityscape. I heard the pealing of bells and longed to stay. I wanted to, but I couldn't tarry, for a river must always be on her way. The next poem is on Mumbai when they had the terrorist attack. And there are two things that are really that were playing on my mind. One is, of course, the thing that happened. And those days on my way to office, there was a little market, and there would be that the cage thing where there was a lot of poultry. And I always closed my eyes when I went there because I was wondering in case in front of me a neck would be wrung. And so I've combined both those images into this poem. Mumbai, 26th November, 2008. A spray of bullets, and then he fell. A mangled mess on tombstone white. Then the shrieks and the bullets as she ran to put together her slaughtered man. Another spray, and another fell. And then silence, then shrieks and yells. A spray again of blood and lead. Then the silence of the living dead. No shrieks now. They were muffled too. But even then, the heap still grew. Mothers, fathers, husbands, wives, frightened children, helpless lives. The blood flowed on as bodies fell. Then it trickled, and then it gelled. A bloody Rangoli on a bloody night. The pristine flow, now red and white. Like poultry on the journey back, with a butcher on a Tuesday night. My turn now. I know my fate. Silence, more silence, and still I wait. The next one is, speaking through the picture frame of somebody who has passed on and who's framed. This was written sometime after my brother's death, and I was just imagining what he would be feeling in that frame. Living on in a picture frame. I was dusted and put back as sunlight streamed in through the open window and brightened up the room. Her tresses were now streaked with grey. The lines beneath her eyes had darkened so. I locked her in my gaze, but she wouldn't look. Glazed and damp, the sparkle froze. I could hear her breathe and sniff and sigh. Yet there was a time when I didn't know. Slim as ever and pretty still, she brushed past me in rustling silk. As she placed fresh flowers and incense sticks, then cleaned the lamp and trimmed the wick. Something to warm this wandering soul while she was at work and the children at play and the clock ticked through another day. The next one is again a poem of travel, physical travel, and then travel beyond. It's called When That Journey Beckons. Always together, you and I, weren't we? This again was kind of written at that time after my brother's passing on. Those day trips in the forests, the frolics by the sea, with the waves that dumped the crabs right there beneath our feet. Sweet was the smell of pines, and so cool the touch of the breeze when it crept up behind us from over the frothy streams. Remember the ride on the monorail high above the icy fields? The snowmen and the snowball fights, the bonfire with the evening meal. I remember still that sunrise from that hilltop in the dawn. The colors splashed across the sky, and lo, the day was born. How we laughed all the way up the grassy banks that noon, when the watchman caught us stealing those berries behind his room. Those quiet moments in the boat while rowing out to sea. And then you laughed to see me watch the sun slip away from me. The safaris, the treks, the rides, the catamarans on stormy seas. All the times we walked together down mud tracks lined with trees. So many journeys, so many trips. Together we've called our own. But when that journey beckons, it'll be mine to take alone. So this was, just kind of, it happened at that time, but just putting together what a physical journey would be and what, when you have to take that journey on your own. Do I have time to read a couple more? Purabhi? Purabhi, do I have time to read a couple more or should I end?
Purabhi, you muted? You're muted, Purabhi?
Yeah. Mayura, you can read the one on what is it? The horse.
Okay.
The horse?
Yeah.
Yeah, which you had submitted. And then we can move on to our platform poets. Thank you.
All right. So this one was, I had read this book, War Horse by Michael Morpurgo. And that book has stayed with me for a long time. And then again, I was reading Michael Morpurgo's book where he talked about inspirations for all his stories. And then the memories came back about this particular horse. And I love horses. So this is what I wrote, thinking of Morpurgo's War Horse. I'm a war horse in a strange land. My home is far away, lined with gorse and hay and heather on a farm by the bay. Shy, quiet creature that I am, foreigner in a foreign land. Mid mines and flares and trenches, no fields, no streams, just sodden sand. The little boy who rubbed me dry. My first night in the stable stall. I dream of him each aching night, tired, lonely, hungry, and cold. This is where this was one poem where I played a lot and tried to get this right, where I was talking about syllables. I was wondering whether I should begin with cold or whether I should, end it with cold, just that one short syllable. And then finally, I kept rearranging these 4 words. And what sounded best to my ears was tired, lonely, hungry, and cold. The gunshots never cease, nor the cries, nor the wails, nor moans of the ones who were sold sweet dreams of glory. Valor they must own. Pastures turned to stinking wasteland, rivulets into bloody flows. What good the dreams you sold the boys, broken, bereft, now comatose? We cringe together, soldier and I, each time the cannon roars. I start and shy, and he sits still, but trembling in his soul. I'm a war horse in a strange land. My home is far away, lined with gorse and hay and heather on a farm by the bay. So here I deliberately tried to use contrasting imagery to bring out the effect of war. Thank you so much for giving me this time to read my poems.
Thank you,
thank you.
Mayura.
Yeah, Mayura, thank you so much for your readings. Each poem was so different and so diverse, and Auschwitz really had my, I got goosebumps during your reading of the poem. And, even the one about your brother, about the picture frame, all your poems had really, they were really diverse. And thank you so much for being our guest poet this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, due to the exigencies of time, I'm afraid I have to race like a racehorse now. Otherwise, I would ask everybody for their comments. Please put your comments on the chat box. And now I think our next poet, Anil, am I right? I think it's you, right, Anil?
I think so, yeah. I think it was
Anil. So
Yeah, it's
over
my
to
turn.
Anil Kumar Parat. Yeah.
Thank you
I
so
just
much.
want to tell everyone I've enjoyed the session, but I have to leave now. There's certain household commitments I have.
Yeah.
But
Also, another thing I'd like to say, thank you so much for being here, Rachna. Another thing I'd like to say that anybody who has any commitments and obligations, please feel free to leave, because the evening is just meant to be enjoyed at its own pace. So please, if anybody has dinner obligations or any other, whatever of the evening you've enjoyed, that's very nice. And thank you for being with us. Now over to you, Anil.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for this opportunity. I am Anil Kumar Parat. I used to be in business. Now I'm happily retired and living in Kerala. And I hope to take up writing in a much more serious way. Today, I'm planning to read 2 of my poems. One was written in 2013, just after I lost my cat. His name was Hari Bhaskar. And he was a great cat to have. He was a soulmate kind of. He knew whenever I was, down in the dumps, and he would just snuggle up to me. And it was always the contemplative kind. He kind of he knew exactly when to frolic, and I would always catch him in his very, very deeply contemplative modes. He had something about him, really. This first poem called Cat's Reality is all about him, but then I've used a lot of imagery, and that imagery is basically, I would say, not deliberate. It so happened that his image stuck inside me for long years after his passing, and they just transformed into words. So here goes. The cat's reality. My cat one day discovered the mirror. He jumped onto a table and looked into it sideways and saw another reality. and was fascinated and enchanted. And he just wouldn't let go. And again went after it. The other cat was enchanted too. And he kept pawing at my cat and meowing a similar meow. And he wouldn't let go either, though I tried telling him that it was futile, that his reality was different. But my cat seemed not to agree. Did he see something that I didn't? He pawed at it every day and kept pawing and meowing until one day he made it there, or so it seems. Well, he's not here now, and neither is my dad, nor my grandma, my little sister, and so many others, and many things besides, and little wisps of memories even. They all seem to have succeeded, like my cat, the cat's reality. My next poem was literally written in the dead of the night. Chennai, when it storms, it storms. And from my bedroom window, I woke up suddenly and I found the coconut palms swaying in the darkness and a sudden burst of lightning. So here goes, wet night. I wanted it to be very short and it turned out to be short. Again, the words just happened because the image was frozen in my mind. Here goes, wet night. Sinister, dark, looming, brooding horizon. Angry ghouls growl, flailing their arms, hissing, spitting venom. Icy breath frosts my window. Miserable mongrels howl a dirge, mourning souls long departed. An unseen hand clicks a silent flash. Eternity poses, but for a moment. Wet night. Thank you.
Thank you, Anil. Truly wonderful poetry, and what imagery. I mean, you know, such visual imagery here, angry growls and auditory. You've blended so many, different kinds of angry growls growl, flailing their arms, hissing, spitting venom. A combination of imagery, really. And even in your other poem, The Cat's Reality, I liked how you took it from the personal, from the cat looking at its reflection every day, to all that is, and the sudden disappearance of the cat, to all the disappearance of people from your life, all those who had disappeared as well. I mean, I think that is a, beautiful transition and done in such a beautiful manner. Thank you, Anil. Over to our next speaker for the evening. All messages for Anil in the chat box, please. And over to our next speaker, poet for the evening. Is it Vrinda?
Yes, it's me.
Yeah. Over to you, Vrinda.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. I'm so happy to be reading my poem, to be presenting my poem at this fantastic forum, such a prestigious forum of wordsmiths. And how did I be influenced? How was I influenced by imagery, and why? See, basically, I'm a classical dancer. I'm a Bharatanatyam dancer, and I've been teaching dance. I've been dancing since the age of 10.
And every time when we dance, we use a lot of imagery in our dance. Like, when we say Nayaka, we give the Nayaka many attributes. Like we say, he has beautiful eyebrows like a bow, and then he has a Mandasmita, and then he has eyes that twinkle like the stars in the sky, and then his face shone like the sun. So there is so much of imagery. If we don't use this imagery, we will not have a connect with the audience. So rasa is born. Rasa is born only when we connect with the audience, and the audience is able to understand what we are performing. Because if I just show a Nayaka, or if I just show a sea, it will not reach out to them. I have to, add on to their imagination. Like when I show the sea, I show the birds flying, I show the fish, I show the boat and children playing around and all that. So that's the kind of imagery I learned from a very young age. I was associated with. So this seamlessly flowed into the poetry that I wrote. So I really didn't know whether I was writing organic, I was using organic imagery, or, all the various like organic or kinesthetic or olfactory. I really didn't know that, but it just flowed seamlessly into my poetry. And also I was influenced into writing, into using a lot of imagery by my connect with nature. Since I go on expeditions, and since I'm a mountaineer, I'm always on the mountains, the snow-capped peaks, the flowers, the animals, the birds, the rivers, the lakes, they all had a great impact on me. And of course, the great poets who paved the way for us, especially my favorite is Ruskin Bond. I'm a great fan of him. And so all my poems are, I think I learned my imagery. I just absorbed the imagery from all of this. So today my poem is In the Image of Man, from Formless to Form. I'll read it. In the image of man, from formless to form. In the beginning of time, from the instance I took birth as a human on this planet, I was nourished by Mother Earth. I thanked her for her abundance. The yellow-orange embers that leaped up and about provided heat for me and all of creation to sustain. I thanked the great flame for the warmth that it enveloped me with. The wind at one moment, powerful and destructive, and at another, gentle and caressing, offered me lessons on resilience and strength. I thanked the wind for the pleasant sounds that it carried, for its implicit instructions on strength and support. My spirits fell when the blue skies darkened with gray clouds, but rose again with joy when rain poured down, feeding my fields, filling the rivers and wells. Flowers bloomed and my heart was happy. I thanked water for naturally cleansing me with its wetness. I looked up at the infinite space above me, the higher intellectual being that created all of this must rule from there, I believed. I thanked that supreme being for this splendorous creation. I believed the 5 elements were my gods. I created hymns in praise of them, sang them with intense devotion, and offered to them all I had. The natural elements, earth, fire, water, wind, and space, the sun, the moon, the twinkling stars, the animals, the trees, were all sacred, and they became my gods. And then one day, on the sandy banks of a river in the forest, I created a shrine with stones. Then I consecrated with powerful chants. I cleansed them with water, milk, and sweet-smelling oils. I lit brass lamps and offered flowers from the woods, food from my kitchen, and draped them with satins and silks. The gods resided in those stones, I was sure. I could see shapes and forms in these stones. I fashioned beings with several hands and heads. I placed them on golden pedestals. Elaborate rites and rituals I performed. They were divine beings from the heavens, come down on earth to protect me and fulfill all my desires of longevity, good health, happiness, and prosperity. Disciplined by the rituals, cleansed and purified by the intense incantations, my entire energy was spent in appeasing the gods. My mind was tired. My body was limp with ill health. I could see poverty and helplessness, insecurity and anxiety in me and around me. I closed my eyes. I sat in deep thought. I knew that this was not the truth. Days flew by. Seasons changed. I recognized the divine spark in me. I am the creator. I open my eyes to create the world that I want. I close my eyes to dissolve everything within me. I am the effulgent one. I shine through sickness and strength, through joy and sorrow. Day after day, every day, I am that superconscious entity that knows no birth and death. I am truth. I am the auspicious one. A certain silence descends on me. I am the form. I am the formless. I am the divine being. I am that I am. Peace, peace, peace. This is...
Brinda, thank you. Yeah, would you like to say something more, Brinda?
No, nothing else. Yeah.
Brinda, such a beautiful, written in the true spirit of a dancer. The imagery had so much of movement in it, you know, taking us through all the elements and to the final moment of truth. And, you know, also about the devotion comes through, the devotion of a dancer, just as a musician does his riyaz every day. So your devotion to all the forms, to all the, everything that makes you a dancer, the gratitude for all other life forms. Because, you know, body also,
yes.
It's just, you know, it's the body, it's a, you know, your body takes on the form and of different dances. So you have to have that gratitude for nature and other life forms, which you are depicting through your dance. Yes. Thank you so much, Brinda. Thank you. And thank you for writing this poem when I requested you to, and to bring out imagery. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Rukmani, would you like to say anything, Rukmani? Jija? Rukmani, Jija, Shaji, would you like to say anything before we go on to our next poet?
I would like to comment. I think Brinda just danced what is known as a Varna in Bharatanatyam.
Yeah.
He took a gamut of, you know, the evolution of faith. And that was a fantastic one. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. And over to our next poet now of the day, Anuradha Nalapat. And our last poet of the day will be Yumna Hari Singh. So over to you, Anuradha.
Thank you. I am basically an artist. So I thought I would share the process of how you create images, how you make them, how you break them. So we are constantly putting colors onto our canvases and, you know, lines, and some lines are thick, some are thin. This process goes on for a long time until at some point we are responding to some kind of a movement which starts from within you. There is some vibration, something that urges you to start this whole process. And that's where you begin. Now you can choose to ignore it, or you can choose to do something about it, whether it is writing or whether it is painting. I think it might be the same. So many a times you ignore it. Now in painting, once you start putting these colors, at some point, I feel that you work on many canvases at the same time, 3 or 4, 5 canvases, because it's an energy. You don't even know what it is. It's just a movement which you're trying to put it down in a few canvases. And then, so you don't know where you're going to end. Therefore, this is my process of working. I work on 4 or 5 canvases at the same time. Now, at some point, you realize that images you're carving from whatever you have put there in the first place, you're slowly beginning to carve. They're staring at you. You don't know what it is at this moment, but they are staring at you. And you are looking at the canvas for a while. You're sitting there. You take a break at this point. You go in because you feel something has been accomplished. And so you do take a break and then you go in. And then you come back and see whether are they still looking back at you? Are they still staring at you? Are they still talking to you? And when I see that, yes, there is something still going on between me and the canvas, then you slowly, like pulling at a rope, you slowly start carving these things about. And I feel very anxious when I do that because I don't know what it is. And many a time there is a conversation going on where I say, no, this is too much. I cannot do that. I don't know how to draw that. I've never done that. I don't want to get into that. I'm not good at lines. I'm not good at these colors or whatever. But finally, you come to a place where there is no choice, and then you just do it, and you are bringing out these. This is how images come out for me as a painter. And then there is no stopping it. Now, at this point, you feel quite content and satisfied, even though you don't know what the full picture is going to be. There is a feeling of elation inside you because something is coming out. It is an exploration, something new things are coming out. At the end of it, there is a feeling of peace. There is a feeling of happiness, like Anil's cat, the way he feels with a cat, the way I feel with a cat. There are some very an accomplished artist and a writer, Mr. Pushkin also, who is here with us today, who writes beautifully in English and in Malayalam, and also painter. So anyway, so this is my process. Writing, I have just, started moving into poetry, and this group has really encouraged me to do it. And I'm not very aware of how the process starts, but I would think that it's somewhat similar. I'm not really able to say how it starts, but it just happens sometimes. So the first poem that I'm reading here is called Whiskers. And here again, it's about my cat. And it's I guess it's a relatively simple poem because it's just about feeding a cat, what I felt when I was feeding a cat. But then, cats are not just, they're not just cats. Our pets are not just pets. So this bond that you share with them and the way you look at them, I've always felt that there's something more to eyes than what you think they are. It's different. What I see is different. What you see is different when you look at a cat or anything. So this is what happens. So at some point, you just freeze that moment and then you feel like writing about it. So this is what I wrote about my cat. Next to a wheezing refrigerator, a clock ticking on a bare wall, my eyes spilling the scent of a feast to the sudden nip of a shifting season. In them, the anxious unveiling of a psalm. As his lime green eyes embrace mine. For a moment, he will just look at you. And that's when you are aware, okay, something's going on, something's going to happen here now. Something very beautiful is going to, seasons are shifting here. Sometimes you miss it, but at sometimes you're able to catch it. as he licks the bony fish head with care, as he picks it, drops it, looks, loves it, his honey-whirled head silently engaged in a tilted crunch. It could rip a tender throat in two. Watching with abated breath, I whisk an anxious doubt, head tilted, eyes glued, wheezing, easing, releasing. I crack the stubborn entrails of a bony doubt. A weakness splinters, a piece of sorrow shudders, shifts. I break into a sigh, drift into a sky, a hunger subdued. As we lick our lips in content, to the tick, tick away on a bare wall. This one, again, is the imagery is, it came from, again, my experience. Mostly I write about my experiences. So a feeling of fulfillment and content and so one with nature, like Vrinda talks about. So on a walk with a cat, you know, with the wind, and suddenly something shifts. So I write when something touches you very deeply, then I try to figure out what is it? What happened? What happened? Everything was so fine. What happened now? And for me, it is something which gives me an understanding and clarity of an experience that comes to you. That's the only reason mostly why I write. So here again, I'm alluding to the subconscious mind, which suddenly gives you one more thing to deal with and says, okay, now you just take a look at this. You thought everything is fine? Yeah, take a look at this. So this is what it's called: levelers meet prayers. Don't be fooled by the lazy expanse of a sparkling sea. Nothing in sight. A hungry shadow of a seagull, and in a split second the sea bursts forth. A hungry shadow of a seagull, and in a split second the sea bursts forth as sea lion. Whiskers and flippers tearing through the veil, snapping a pretty neck into two. Don't be fooled walking with the wind, as if the wind talking through the cat by your side, blooming through the flower. Your eyes blinking open, that one last chapter you must write. Your eyes blinking open, that one last chapter you must write. Lips drinking dry, those forever dissonant passing notes. In a split second, tearing through the wind and my veil, a dog. Mouth open, tongue wagging, in anxious reach of my cat's butter belly. In anxious reach of a prayer that unfurled, one petal at a time, one slow moon at a time, one sour note, discordant rush at a time. Just within reach of all that's precious and slept in my arms and curled in my lap. All that's precious in that one last chapter I must unfurl, about terror and fear and hungry shadows of the sea. Prayers, cats and veils, levelers, dogs and sea lions. Prayers, cats and veils, levelers, dogs and sea lions, and the multiple ways in which they sparkle and startle, tipping you, for sure, into the liquid arms of the sea. That's it.
Anuradha, such a beautiful evening. You have really, all our poets have given us such treats this evening that I really, don't have much to, I mean, but I have to speak about this imagery in this particular, as his lime green eyes embrace mine, as he licks the bony fish head with care, as he picks it, drops it, looks, loves it, his honey whirled head, silently engaged in a tilted crunch. It could rip a tender throat in two. The savagery and the gentleness also of your love for your cat. The diverse images. Really, I mean, really beautiful poetry this evening, whether it's Anil Kumar Parat's cat or Anuradha's cat. And now we have Anuradha, your last poem of, what was it, Levelers, the diverse imagery out there. Now we move on to Yumna Hari Singh and her poem, which has stayed in my head forever. I think it stayed in my head for the last 2 months. So over to you Yumna, with your Spy Hopper, and even with your morning walk. In fact, I looked up matryoshkas and I found really a plethora of things on the net. So I hope we'll all be able to move in great imagery from these poems that we are hearing this evening. Over to you, Yumna.
Thank you so much, Purvi. Thank you, everybody. I know it's been a long evening, but it never feels long, when I listen to everybody reading their poetry. I think I just get taken to this other world. And I also love how everybody responds to everybody else. It feels so well curated, Purvi. It's like you move from one poem to another poem. It's fantastic. So Purvi asked me to say a little bit about myself, but I'm actually not, because she said since my poems are short, I could try and squeeze in a third, which is what I'm going to try and do. And I'll tell you a little bit of poems. The first one she wants me to read, I think some of you may have heard before, it's called Spy Hopper. It's based on my experience where this whale just popped up next to me. So this is sort of a narration of this afternoon outside Lanai Harbor in Maui when we were on a whale tour. And, if you've gone on a whale watching trip, all you see in the distance is, gray curves sinuously dancing. If you're lucky, you see fins flash or whale tails come up and go down. And this was the scene, Spy Hopper. Sparkling, unfathomable blue bandies itself elsewhere into palettes of adjacent hues. Males compete sinuously gray, smoking plumes of rainbows at starboard stern space truck eye. Hydrophone chatter interrupts the tenor singing this spring song. Mothers and calves and escorts cavort. A face too large slides noiselessly up, swivels its eye, and vanishes. And I think that everybody always benefits from my telling you what this is about. So, apparently every spring, humpback whales have one song. So when you put that audio phone down, you can hear this one song echoing around, and they all sing the same song, and it's different from spring to spring. So that has to do with one of the stanzas. And the other stanzas is just how much activity there is. You have various groups and pods of whales that are all doing different things. And then we suddenly had this whale pop up right next to us, maybe 20 feet away. And the face is so huge, it really is an alien experience, like your mind can't comprehend it. So that was one poem. Purvi, is it all right if I share another poem instead of the one that I was intending to, Morning Walk? Is it okay if I share another one?
Yeah, Yumna, it's fine. It's fine.
Acha, okay. So I don't know if I can share my screen, but I'm going to just try if I can. Tell me if you can see it, because I haven't shared this with you earlier. Achane, it seems too complicated, so I'm just going to read you the poem. And if someone else can figure out how to share
just
it,
go ahead and read.
So basically, this poem is called Imprint. It's in memory of a woman who died in 1869 at the age of 28. And the doctor who treated her essentially saved her thighs, the skin of her thighs, and treated them. The way you treat skin is if you want to use it for things like binding, you soak it for a long time. One way is to soak it in pots of urine for like 3 months at a time, and then it really the skin sort of tans into leather. And he used her skin about 20 years later to bind 3 books. They're all about sort of women reproductive health. He lost his first wife in childbirth about 6 years after this patient had died. But he binds these books about 20 years later. And one of the books that her skin binds is actually Louis Bourgeois-Boussier's Recueil des Secrets, which was first published in 1601. And she is the first, that book is the first book on midwifery or childbirth written by a woman. So this poem is called Imprint. This skin, stretched, taut, binds a work of the first published midwife, whose skin was the first to touch the crowning skins that would bear the crowns of Ireland and England and Scotland, of Spain and France and Orleans and Savoy, stretching outwards the legacy of Medici skin and bone and blood and sinew. This skin, stretched taut, doesn't remember sinew or muscle or blood or bone. These inner thighs barely remember being mammalian at all. So that's the poem. It's called Imprint. And I think I'm 5 minutes on the dot, Purabhi. So I'll stop there.
Yumna, that was a marvelous poem. I think, really like, I don't know where you found this information, but, it just goes to show that anything, centuries don't matter. And the imagery you've created and how the knowledge has been disseminated through the ages. It's really, thank you for your beautiful poem. Please put it on Poetry Society and Writers so that everybody can read it and we can, absorb the images. Thank you. We have overshot by 10 minutes. So thank you, all our marvelous poets of the evening and our guest speakers. Over to Anil Kumar Parat for the vote of thanks. Sanjula, would you like to say anything before the vote of thanks? Jija, Rukmani?
I've been responding to everybody individually, Purabhi.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Rukmani, because we are on this, what do you call it, on this run. Yeah, Anil Kumar Parat, over to you for the vote of thanks. Thank you.
A minute before Anil speaks, I just want to say it's been a mesmerizing evening. It's been really wonderful listening to everyone, and what I really liked was the difference in the imagery that everybody used. It was so personal, and yet it was so holistic. It was a wonderful evening, and I must say it's been a pleasure to be here. Very well curated and very well rendered. Thank you so much. And I've recorded the entire thing, so hopefully we'll share it with everyone.
Okay. I'll make it short and sweet because I think we are really running short for time. On behalf of the Art Mantram, literary Mantram, and on behalf of Rukmani, Prabhakar, Lakshmishwar, Shaji, Nair, Purabhi, who has taken a lot of pains to curate this evening's session. I thank each and every one of you for being part of this lovely, lovely evening, where we heard some wonderful poetry, particularly from, in Malayalam and, the 3 generations of poets. That was a very special evening. And of course, Mayura Tiwari, whose poems were really out of the world, very wonderfully read out. And, it made a lot of sense because imagery in poetry, as Purabhi, came out with a lot of very, very, very interesting observations on the kind of imagery that can be used. All of us use imagery, of course, but not really consciously. At least in my case, I have never been conscious about how I use it. But I realize now that, it's been it's a wonderful tool to use to put across your ideas and paint your pictures, word pictures. With that, everybody have a good night, and let's meet again as often as we can. Thank you, and over to you, Purabhi, for the final word. I hope I haven't missed anybody. I'm not naming each and every one of you, but I think it's understood.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.